Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday night. Gonna give it about another 2 minutes or so ish or less. Feel free in the meantime if there's a little way you can stretch out your back, get more comfy in your seat, get a glass of tepid water, mute, silence as many distractions as you possibly can. Um, And before we get started next week, we will begin another beginner series. At this time, we're going to keep the 7:30 time. Um, it's just not too late for me personally. I won't be yawning in our conversations. I start to yawn at around 8:30 every night. But we'll do a 6-week beginner series starting next week. That will take us through May. And then in June, we'll get back to our regular talks with topics are going to be generosity, equanimity, um, attachment, what that looks like, stopping the war within. I have several topics coming out the chute in the coming months. So what I share now is stuff I've probably read in about 6 to 8 months ago. I try to sit with it, play with it, find some other things before I try to bring it to y'all. So we'll get started. But there will be a different link. This link is going to stay the same when we pick back up after the beginner series. But there will be a new beginner series email link emailed out. Just be watching for that in the next couple of days. You just have to sign up once and you'll be on for all the weeks. But it's going to be a little bit of a refinement of what we did in January, some additional things to add to it, and a little bit more. Just a few extra things on all of it. So like I said, y'all are all my beta group and I have a lot of content I need to put out, and I need to do a few rounds of some of these things to make sure I have it all in there for y'all, and y'all get to benefit from all of that. So hopefully benefit. Okay, enough of that. Remember, you're always welcome to, if you're running late, hop on at any time to any of these classes. You should always be able to hop on in. But let's put everything aside for a moment and just take a breath, dropping in to the body. Maybe a few deep breaths in through the nose, sighing it out through the mouth, just helping yourself knock off the edge just immediately, right away. Letting these big exhales just drop you down into here, into now. Not planning, not dealing with things at work or other people. Tune all of that out just for an hour. Notice how the body is feeling. Is your seat balanced, torso long? Legs in an effortless position. Same with the arms, the hands, jaw, eyelids. And just notice, how are things in the mind, in your heart? You're the only one that can peek into those spaces. How is it in there? No judging, no critiquing, just noting. A neutral act of just getting the lay of the land. Remind yourself why you're here, why you're plugged in. No agenda, no expectations. Maybe just a simple remembrance of the benefit of finding your seat, of sitting. Come back to your breath a few times tonight as we talk. Don't forget to breathe. Let that rhythm just be background noise, not distracting, but present, noticeable. Light of awareness has been placed on it. Inhale through the nose. And exhale through the mouth, eyes open. Hello, ladies. As always, if you want to state where in the globe you are, and how are you feeling in this moment? You don't have to share, maybe just make a note in your notebook if you have it there. A simple personal inventory. Contemplative. Mm. I feel all of those things in some way, shape, or form. So tonight is centered around, there's a couple of things here that's going to go. We should be wrapped up by 8:30. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. Tonight's talk is going to be centered around the idea of a refraining practice. And a good way of playing with this is kind of checking in on yourselves every couple of weeks. And by doing that, this is a great practice to do, usually in monasteries, different centers around the world, meditation centers. They do this around the new moon and the full moon. The day before each of those days, they will get together with their group, similar to steps 4 and 5 in the AA program, where you discuss what you're working on. You reflect just in the last 2 weeks. How has that gone? Good, bad, and different? Where are things you can shift, make changes, and then at the same time, let it go. Moving on, right? So it's an idea of kind of dropping the baggage as it builds up, and that nice little check in, another tool that we can do in our practice. in keeping our own selves accountable and building up that discipline, just one thing at a time. So that's what we're going to go through tonight. I'm going to break that up and go a little much deeper with it. Again, every Monday night, it's all meant to be tools to help you find a little bit more peace in your day. The mind for all of us is extremely distracting. We all have that mind, and it's important that we find our tools. We try to have the strength to work the tools as much as we can, knowing some days that's not going to happen, but that's okay too, because that's just how it goes. So, with that, the whole idea here tonight, the theme is living by commitment. Um, and the commitment is to sanity. Um, and the whole idea behind this and maintaining our sanity is freeing yourselves from old habits and fears. And those old habits tend to be the knee jerk responses, our reaction to things, especially when our behavior has gone unchecked and we haven't tried to start to figure out why we do things in certain ways. Why do we keep on getting the same response in the same situation? How are we handling it differently? The same, being able to unpack that in a gentle and non judgmental way for ourselves will go a really long distance, for yourself and for those around you. So, before we go any further, I want to change the script for a second. I know, and I don't know, I maybe depending on any religious upbringing that you may have experienced, maybe not. Um, so many of us were taught that we're fundamentally flawed, or we have voices in our head that tell us that we're fundamentally flawed. Um, I want you to change that tonight on the basis of, for this talk, I want you to look at through the lens of we are fundamentally good. It's our bad habits that make us unskillful in life and cause different forms of suffering, different experiences, karma, cause and effect, right? So for tonight, I want you to play with the idea of you are fundamentally good. That's the basis of where we're at. We're fundamentally good. So stay with me on that one, okay, throughout tonight. In order to live by commitment, so let's define commitment first. Commitment's a pledge, something that binds us mentally and emotionally to someone or something or a course of action. So it's an intentional, deliberate act when we make a commitment. Um, Living by commitment means more than simply acting or not acting. When we make a commitment, we set our intention clearly and know what we are vowing to do or not to do. Um, any questions so far? I'm trying to look at my notes and I hear a cat crying out here. So sorry about that. So here's the deal about the commitment that I am trying to get across to you. Sorry, I needed a second. Um, when we make a commitment and there's that intentional act of doing something or not doing something, that means we aren't acting in a reflexive way, in an untamed way. When we make a commitment, that kind of goes along with a certain level of discipline and a commitment to a daily doing or not doing of something. Um, and so many of our bad habits happen out of urges from us being angry, being offended, um, disappointment, anything across the board that's going to have us have a reflexive response that tends to a certain reflective response that causes harm towards you or others, whether it's your temper, substance abuse, physical harm. Um, you can go across the board on that. Um, when we have an urge, the whole idea with the refraining practice is choosing to refrain from acting on the urge. And when we have an urge and we don't think about it, it's more of like a comfort thing, a vice. That's what we're talking about because we are fundamentally good, right? But we do become unskillful over time if we don't check our behavior and realize and look within and see what we're doing with a gentle approach because we want to be able to see everything and be able to shift and course correct as needed as gently as possible, right? And so that's the whole idea behind this. Um, so, in order to live a life with a minimal amount of suffering, as much as you can help it, as much as you can practice non suffering, there are three commitments when we say commitments. One, do no harm. Two, help others. And three, embrace the world just as it is. That is a lifetime's worth of work right there. I'll say them again. The three commitments that we want to try to live by, and the first one supports the other two. Number one, do no harm. Number two, help others. Three, embrace the world just as it is. These are the keys that open up that doorway of learning how to relax into the fluidity and change of life. We resist a lot of that flow and the constant change, and we want things to be a certain way, look a certain way, wishing things used to be what they were and they never stop type of thing. Um, we need to learn instead of resisting, we need to relax in that ever flow and changing system. And this is a way we can start to learn to do that. It starts to open up that vast space of the mind and takes down the walls of how little you could live versus mentally living in a more expansive place, which allows for more things to happen for you, more opportunity, more possibilities. Um, and in order to start to hit these three commitments, it boils down to you must be willing to work with your mind, with your thoughts, with your emotions. And we start to learn that we start to learn to think twice before speaking and acting. Maybe you have already started doing this a long time ago. Maybe you, like we talked about a couple weeks ago in the karma lecture, where, where is this choice going to take me? Do I really want to go there? This is another way of being able to analyze and look at maybe your reflection point tonight is how are you acting in habitual ways and autopilot ways without intention? And then when you look at those habits that you just are kind of kicking, you haven't bothered or messed with, check them out. See what's there. Maybe nothing's there. Maybe something is there though. Um, and taking that inventory makes a huge difference. It's important to notice how you zone out. Let me rephrase it. Let me put it that way too for you. I'll admit I zone out in the evenings before I go to bed. I turn on The Office or something funny and I fall asleep to it. I guarantee you the TV stays on when I fall asleep. It's just something, it totally just numbs me out. Bad habit, I know, but that's that. Um, but I know that's what I do. And because I know that's what I do have a conscious intention. And the difference is we are fundamentally good. So we have that intention, right, to check ourselves when we can. Sometimes just our habits slip from us, our discipline slips, and we got to get back on. In the moment, in order to get back on, we got to see where we're at. You got to get used to being able to turn inwards, turn towards. You aren't at war with yourself. You aren't ignoring things. You're seeing it, identifying it, letting it go. What stays, stays. What doesn't, doesn't. So a big part on the first commitment, do no harm, is speech. Speech can really support, or speech can really destroy. Um, Even like at yoga retreats or at meditate, I'll say more so meditation retreats. Yoga retreats tend to be a lot of discussion, a lot of connecting with each other. Meditation retreats, you'll have an option of finding a 3, 5, 7, or a 10-day silent retreat. You can get them in increments like that, depending on the center. And what's even interesting, even in total silence, you still can't quiet your mind. The mind's still going to have that constant internal dialogue. And depending on your mood, depending on events, motivation, deep rooted motivation, your intention's going to change, right? We talked about that a couple weeks ago in the lecture with Karma. But with this first commitment, just refrain from harmful speech towards yourself or to other people in all ways. Gossip, judgment, how you interact with everybody. When we're active in refraining from harmful speech, this liberates us in a way of we're more aware of what we're feeling. Whenever we have that urge to lie, to slander, when we see that, if we're practicing, we have that urge, we can choose to refrain. Because that is the human condition. We do get caught up in our emotions, and humans are humans. No one's perfect. We are all going to mess up, and unfortunately, we can't avoid harm. We can't avoid harming no one ever. We're all going to harm someone here and there along the way. The key thing here is just the intention behind it. Notice when you do harm yourself or others. Unpack it, let it go, and move on. Don't carry shame with you and let it fester. Um, it's important that you understand refraining is not repressing. Okay. Repression, when you hold it in and you don't deal with it and you ignore it, that's a bad habit in itself. At the same time, we aren't wanting anybody to act out either. That's the opposite of repression, holding it in, or it's just going to spew everywhere, right? Um, in a lot of therapeutic circles, there's a big debate about which one's more harmful, spewing out, lashing out, acting out, or holding it in. And I think it depends on what you look at it. I think it's harmful both ways. It's harmful to the individual as well as even holding it in, it's still harmful to others because of how that individual acts around other people based on what their moods are and what they're having to hold in and hide and their tools that they have been given to deal with it. Some people have never been given tools on how to deal with it. So they let those monkeys run wild in their head, and those monkeys are driving the car and have no idea how to drive. So in that, we have the ability to have compassion for ourselves and others because it is ongoing work to keep that sanity, to live by that commitment of trying to remain sane. Um, but here's the deal. You got to see your reactions. You have to react. You have to start somewhere. And because if you don't, you have no idea where you're stuck, where you need to start to work. So instead of freezing, do something, and then from there, that gives you a starting point. Um, Remembering we have a genuine trust that we are fundamentally good. So that's giving yourselves the benefit of the doubt, and that's giving other people the benefit of the doubt. Trust that you're fundamentally open hearted and open minded. It's our emotions, it's those spots unchecked that tend to build up and create different beasts over time if you don't have a handle on it. Um, because I don't want you to see yourself as fundamentally flawed, because I want to pull you out of that place of thinking you're a bad person or there's something wrong with you. Forget fundamentally flawed. Trust that you're fundamentally good. Look at it from that angle. Take that approach. That's a kinder, gentler approach. And when you take that approach and trust that you are fundamentally good, I am fundamentally good, the whole world is fundamentally good, where you're just really unskillful right now on how to relate to each other. And it all starts with us all looking in towards ourselves and starting to take that inventory. How do I respond to this? Is this okay? How does this play out? Well, crap. This is how it ends up every single time. Okay, well, what can we do differently? And it turns into just kind of a puzzle, a way of figuring out, finding that balance, and then trusting at the end of the day, never losing sight that you're still fundamentally good and you did the best you can. That is the practice, without the mind getting angry and abusive. So, really, this boils down to the process of seeing your habits clearly. That's what we're talking about tonight. When we see our habits clearly, we can begin to train in knowing what we're doing when we're doing it. And when you know what you're doing when you're doing it, you'll start to notice in being kind to yourself in your speech and your actions. The more you stay in that tempo, when you do something that's off, you're going to notice that contrast. That's the nice thing. You'll know when there's a slip, when there was a bump. Identify it as something as simple as not that, not a not a mess up, or however you want to phrase it in the stronger worded way. Um, but when you see an old pattern and it's no longer being good to you and others, it's time to remove it. That's the nice thing. You can change that landscape. Habits also mean, scientifically, neural pathways. You're just going back and reinforcing something that's already been placed there. If you can practice refraining, you're starting to strengthen new neural pathways. You're choosing not to feed into that bad habit. So there is some actual rewiring that happens. And that's why new moon, full moon, 14, 15 days apart, that's a good time to kind of check in with yourself in the last couple of weeks. What have I been working on? Choose one thing. What have I been refraining to do? Me personally, my refraining practice has been less screens. That's something we really got amped up on during the COVID season. And I know we're still in it. I don't think we're past it, but in those darker moments when we were all locked down. I don't see that happening again. Hopefully, knock on wood. Um, that's something, a refraining of grabbing the phone, of what app on the phone is tempting me to get on it, right? And so, and it can be even down to food. It's just any how you interact with people, your patience. Another practice of refraining for me is the drop off line at school in the mornings. I really struggle with those women. Um, I have not found a good way of doing this yet, and we've been doing this since August, and it's April. So it looks different per season, but there are certain things, if you can get this down, and if it's small and um, it's almost practice on the little things for when the big things happen, and it's knee jerk responses. Your knee jerk response is to refrain, is not to react. That's the whole idea at the end of the day. We're able to train ourselves ultimately down the line, eventually, not to just knee jerk response react. Because in those knee jerk responses, it tends to cause some harm because it's gone unchecked a lot of the times. Um, I love what my meditation teacher said. He said, "Don't believe everything you think." Um, and that's a way of going through the mind and making sure it's not taking control, making sure the thoughts are in there as a yes, as a need to be. And again, this is again a process of seeing our habits clearly. What is it that we're doing that keeps us putting us in the same feeling time and time again? You know, what are the situations, the people, the environment, um, the task at hand? Um, the first commitment, do no harm. It works with the causes of suffering and brings about an effort to ease the suffering. We're trying to lessen the suffering, right? We aren't wanting to add to the bad. Um, and the second one is, what was the second one? Second one is help others. So it's not that we aren't even not wanting to add to the pain in the world. We're actually wanting to add to the good in the world by helping others, embracing the world just as it is. Zero negatives on all of those things. There's nothing negative contributing to the world in these three commitments. You're actually making it a better place, honing in on these three commitments. Do no harm, help others, embrace the world just as it is. Checking in every 2 weeks. How am I doing? Where could I do better? Is there a new habit forming? What's going on here? This is a new thing. Is that making sense? The first commitment is also called the narrow way because it's comparable to walking down a narrow corridor. If you lose your awareness, you'll veer off course and bump into the wall. So you have to keep bringing your attention back to the path, walking straight ahead. And we need a straightforward approach like this when it comes to do no harm. Right there, flat across the board. What you say, what you do no harm. And have the intention behind it, even if you do mess up, you were intentionally not trying to cause harm. Harm still may happen, but you can still have that intention of, I was actively trying to not cause harm. We don't speak or act out, period. Straightforward. Long, narrow corridor, straight ahead. This is what I like. The first commitment, do no harm, it requires us to be diligent about interrupting the momentum of habit. I'm going to say that again. The first commitment requires us to be diligent about interrupting the momentum of habit. Many of our escapes, the way we avoid things, the way we ignore the stuff that we need to focus on, is involuntary. It's those habits. That's the whole point. Our escapes, what we do to just zone out, our vices. We all have them. We all got to learn how to work with them. We're never going to get rid of them. Okay? Never going to get rid of them. But I think we've all been there when a certain urge comes on and it's irresistible. For an untrained mind, they have no shot. But for a trained mind, somebody who's been practicing, when the urge is present, it's not so overwhelming because now you know kind of how to deal with those habits, with those urges. You've analyzed, you've prepared. Think of it as like tonight, we're training again and again in less highly charged situations. So when the highly charged situations does bombard you, you have some fresh habits, you have some fresh tools that you've been working with. Your certain blades in your mind have been sharpened for you to be able to use them when these more intense moments come about. It's at least more fresh on the mind. By training with everyday irritations, we develop the knack of refraining when the going gets rough. It takes patience and understanding of how we're hurting ourselves not to continue taking the same old escape route or speaking out. So, refraining from harmful speech and harmful action is key. And even more so, in everything that you do it with the intention of nonviolence. Everything you do, you're acting from a place of not wanting to harm yourself or others. Always, every breath, every moment. Is it, can you live and establish and try to nourish and maintain that underlying energy? Is that making sense? The whole idea with refraining and how you see that. So don't see it as anything negative. It's fine tuning those habits that have, and there, some of us have habits that we've had for years. Every night I eat Reese's with chocolate milk since I was like 12. I'll be 37 this year, literally every single night. It's gluten free though. So here's a sweet little proclamation on mindful speech, and I'll include it in the email for y'all. It says on mindful speech, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech, I vow to cultivate right speech. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I will do my best not to lie, to not gossip or slander, to not use harsh or idle speech, and to not say things that bring about division or hatred. I aspire always to speak the truth. And look at it this way. If there's no temptation to act out or to respond, to speak out, to get angry, if you don't have that opportunity to do it, the commitment to not harm won't be as transformative. And the whole idea here is for this practice to transform you. and to come into the fold a bit more into humanity, and how badly we need more people coming into the fold in this way. Um, we need some things to trip us up. We need to practice, and then we need life to trip us up so we can get stronger in these spaces, so we can see what's going on. How do we respond? Is that response the right way to do it? Where is this going to take me? Because ultimately, once you do start living from a place of non-harming, non-violence in all things, how you eat, what you eat, that goes down to red meat, white meat, fish, whatever you want to eat in that sense. Like, it's your whole living. Do no harm, do not kill. The list can go a few more on respecting what belongs to others, not harming others with sexual energy, um, being aware of what substances like alcohol, drugs, and other intoxicants can do to you over a long period of time. Knowing these things kind of keeps yourself accountable. So, the key here, the remedy, boils down to just examining yourself. See exactly what you're doing. Note harmful thoughts, apply the remedies to ease the mind. Because we tend to think that we're always right. Some of us, depending on our relationships, it's all relative based on who we talk to. Um, some people continue to make others feel angry, inferior by how they treat them with arrogance, staying in that ego. Um, and then it creates all these unnecessary battles. If we just check that stuff, then so much of the global suffering could subside, in the littlest ways, in the small ways. It's not in big movements. This is just, how are you going to interact with your bank teller? How are you going to interact with the people who walk by your house? Are you going to look down and avoid eye contact? Are you going to just see people and give them that little energetic, with the mask on your face, a little smile with your eyes, and give a little acknowledgement of, hello, person, I see you, instead of avoiding human interaction, right? Um, when you're refraining, you're feeling the pull of habitual thoughts and emotions, but you're not escaping by acting or speaking out. When you're refraining, you're feeling the pull of habitual thoughts and emotions, but you're not escaping the pull by acting or speaking out. You're staying with it and not acting out. So, this little inner exercise for yourself would go, notice how you feel. What does it feel like in the body to have these crazy cravings or aggressive urges? So, notice how you feel. Notice your thinking. What sort of thoughts do these feelings give birth to? And then notice your actions. How do you treat yourself and other people when you feel this way? Notice how you feel. Notice your thinking. Notice your actions. Feelings, thinking, actions. Refraining when you can. All in the name of trying to reduce your suffering and suffering of others. This is a commitment to sanity. This is the last thing I'm going to read, and then we'll sit. Will be a good stopping point. When we make a compassionate, fearless relationship with the reality of the human condition being our habits, our emotions, the sense of groundlessness. When we make this relationship with this reality, gradually something starts to shift fundamentally. We experience sky-like, unbiased nature of our mind. Those walls come down. So much more is possible. This state of mind is completely fresh, completely new, completely unbiased, and we call it enlightenment. So basically, enlightenment is already here. We just need to touch it. We need to know it. We need to trust it. Isn't that awesome? At any time, we can start to excavate all the gunk. If we have not worked some things out in our mind, the longer we sit, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, 21 minutes, whoa, the mind is really going to start to unfold because you're just watching it, everything that's there. You aren't keeping yourself distracted with busyness, right? And so that's what enlightenment is. That's what the general base, it's nothing special. It's knocking down all the walls and seeing the whole vast open space, not just a tiny little room that you think is your mind. And the room is built up of judgments, of fears, of anxiety, of trauma, of all the life experiences that this current human reality, this condition that we all live, this is how it is. So the homework I want to give you tonight is the new moon. The full moon, I want to say, is going to be the 28th or 29th. So you can get on your calendar and try to look up. I'm pretty sure you can find some apps that will tell you when it's just a good way of marking it, of just kind of keeping yourself in check and reflecting on where we are with our refraining practice. Maybe we're working on refraining from one thing for a while. Work on that, get it down, see if you can work its way out and get it resituated, recalibrated, and then move on to then. Don't be in a hurry, right? You'll get it down. It'll start to come. The mental muscles will start to develop more. So these are your reflection points, okay? And I'll say this again in a moment when we sit, because we're just now talking about what we're going to refrain from. So tonight, maybe sit and let things pop up and be open to that space of, where can I start? What can I start to refrain? Where can I start to practice? Okay. And I will tell you, there are some things I've been trying to refrain with for years. I still don't have it down. Okay. So, but we're going to keep on trying. So reflection. What have I done with my body in the last 2 weeks? What have I done with my speech in the last 2 weeks? What about my mind? Is it steady or all over the place? Maybe never present? As much as possible, explore these questions with as little self-criticism and blame as possible. How is the mind? What have you done with your body? What have you done with your speech? We start to notice every couple of weeks, maybe this is a journal prompt for you, sharing insights about what helps and what hinders. And then try again. You get another 2 weeks. See how it goes. And again, this is why it is similar to step 4 and 5 in AA. This is something that that community does, and it keeps it so wholesome and honest and just a really welcoming space for anyone to just be, to break down or not. Um, the difference is when we do this is having the intention not to harm. So even when you do harm, it's probably going to be more minimal than if you did that same action without even considering do no harm. There's already an effort to minimize whether it happens or not. Um, be honest with yourself, no self judgment. You want to get to a place where you can move on from it. And the self judgment develops shame, and shame is the place that keeps us from getting up and out. Shame gets in the way of us doing better, getting back up. It keeps us locked down really hard. And um, yeah, okay. Vowing not to harm, vowing, vowing to help, and vowing to accept the world, the reality for what it is. This is basically doing everything we can to benefit others. That covers it across the board. Fundamentally good. There you have it. Okay. I know that was a lot. There was just no way I could keep it simple. I hope that made sense though. So it will give you something to work on every 2 weeks. Um, and again, remember these chats Monday nights are on the YouTube channel. So you can go back to some of the other things that we've already talked about. Refinement. There are some meditation talks that I have gone to from 2014, 2016, one from 2012, even before I was even pregnant. Um, 2011. So some of these listens over time may just be good go backs to just remind you. So don't think you just listen to it once and it's going to seep in. It's very helpful to listen to things on these type of topics more than once. Your mind can always use a little bit more encouragement. Um, any questions before we sit? Adjust your back, give yourself a little stretch, move things out of the way here. And just a big breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and yeah, Emily, go ahead, ask your question. She's wondering about the qualities of a good friend and boundaries. Yeah, there's yeah, because there are people who can kind of zap your energy in a lot of ways, um, especially if it gets to be too much. Um, I would try to maybe recommend. I would actually probably just. Hmm, let me see what my notes say. I'm trying to find a simple way of putting it, and I just don't know if I can put it in a very simple way. because we do have our limits, and that's normal as well. It's good to know that. And I think it's going to be important when it comes to that. That's a sensitive topic for me. I think you just need to, in that sense, be there. You know your limits. You know what you're going to be able to offer and provide. I'm not saying self-sacrifice. There's a difference between the two, if that makes sense, Emily. So give me a thumbs up if you agree with that, or let me know. Um, you don't need to self-sacrifice, but you need to, things that help is if they come and talk with you, you just start kicking off, look, I have 5 minutes. I'm holding space for you. I'm listening. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to help. But if you know what I mean, setting up some boundaries like that, really encouraging in the sense of maybe they need to see somebody professionally, some books. Yeah, exactly right. Like, today's been a really hard day for me. Can you give me later in the week and are you going to be okay for now? Um, yeah, because if they're just wanting to rant or vent, that's one thing. Um, and again, there's only so much of that before you almost can start to encourage them yeah, you only have so much bandwidth, and you have you have your own stuff going on. Um, so at the end of it, even saying when they're done venting, be like, how can I help? What do you need from me? Because then that's also asking, have you thought about a solution? Have you thought about ways around this instead of just venting? Because venting is idle chatter. Venting, you aren't getting anywhere. Ranting, they aren't getting anywhere. And you definitely don't want to support that type of speech like we did tonight, right? Because so much of ranting, venting can be looked at as gossip depending on the topic. Usually when people are ranting or venting, they're needing justification, they're needing validity of some type. So, in a way of just seeing it, hearing it, and then just encouraging them into a more positive place. And it's one of those things where if you aren't used to putting up boundaries, it takes a little time to figure out how that's going to look to put up boundaries. And when we put up boundaries, most people don't like boundaries. They don't. I'll tell you that right now. But boundaries do need to be normalized. And so don't give when you start to feel like you're self-sacrificing. When you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, Miss Emily. You have been with me long enough, even through the screens now, these last several months. You've gone inward enough to know what's making sense and what's not making sense. And you can always email me and we can set up a time to chat separately on this. I can dig out some books and things, okay, and try to maybe help you have directions to give to other people. Does that make sense? Does that help? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, let's sit. A 10-minute sit. When we come back in June, we're going to start to make it more of a 15, 20-minute sit. So we've been doing 10 minutes so far this calendar year, but we're going to add about 5 or 6 minutes come June. So just letting y'all know. Hands in the lap or somewhere comfy. Close those eyes. Pull that breath into the body and then push it out through the nose. Slow pull in again, drawing it in. And sending it out. Check the body. Feeling that you have come into your one seat. A familiar stacking of the bones. Positioning of the joints. A focus of the mind to the here and now. Taking in all that you are, just as you are. Physical body, sensations, 5 senses. The mind. Notice, are a few more walls knocked down? Are things a little bit more open for you now? The practice tonight, the talk tonight was about refraining. And it starts with just noticing ourselves, how we interact with our world, our responses. Where do you just live in autopilot? Are there any habits that you need to check out? Anything causing harm in your life right now that you can take action on? More of a contemplative practice throughout the day as you see it, as you recognize it. Here and now, just notice habits of the thoughts. Maybe it's a domino effect. If you have one thought, then comes another and a familiar strand. Strand getting so long it's spinning out of control. Maybe start with the simple questions. How did I use my body in the last 2 weeks? How did I use my speech? How has my mind been? Has it been steady or has it been all over the place? How much has it experienced peace and presence? The refraining practice is an opportunity to gain clarity about your mind and speech and actions. And at the same time, with that clarity, acknowledging honestly and gently what has happened in the past, laying the harmful deeds aside and going forward. Where are you in this very moment in your life? Not rejecting any part of your experience, knowing it can get confusing. As gently as possible, notice and embrace it all for just as it is. Whatever you've done in the past, remind yourself this is now. You can always connect with your true nature at any time and be free of everything that went before. Instead of letting our regrets drag us down, we can use them to spur us on to not repeat harmful acts, but to learn from them and how to be wiser in the future. Trusting that we are fundamentally good, not fundamentally flawed. Feel yourself in this space, in this body, breathing. Taking a big, deep breath knowing that you made it through another day. Exhale, feeling relief. Feel this sense of relief every time you come back to your breath all throughout your day. You made it back to here, to the now, to the present. And then when you do that, you start to settle down, even if it's for a moment, and the body relaxes a bit. A moment of pause, knowing that pauses are time sensitive. Deep breath in and out. Hope your mind now knows a little more peace. I hope your soul feels a little more liberated. And my hope is that any benefit that we've received from coming together tonight can pour out to those that we interact with tomorrow and throughout the week. So the benefit grows. From my light to yours, namaste.